As soon as Rob Hamilton takes a seat, we'll begin. Hey, Buckeyes, OH. OH. That will never get old. You will carry this with you for the rest of your life, and you have lived here for almost a week, so you're Buckeyes now, okay? All right, so welcome to the 2022 Envirothon final presentation ceremony as hosted by the Ohio Federation of Soil and Water Conservation Districts and our Ohio Envirothon Committee. Can I get a huge shout out for our Ohio Envirothon Committee? I know you guys think you've been planning for this event for a long time, but we have literally been planning this event for 3 years. And so we are very, very, very happy to have you here. And as we talk to our sponsors, our districts, our volunteers, our judges, and everybody we recruited to be a part of this event, we told them we were bringing the very best and the brightest students in all of the United States, Canada, and hopefully China, but that didn't work out, to Ohio. And you know what? We were right. So give yourselves a huge round of applause. We've been with our judges for the past few days, and you know what they've told us? They told us that you're the smartest kids that they've met, the most articulate kids that they've met, and just in general, outstanding people. So please, please remember that you are great people, and we are so very happy that you came here to join us in Ohio. And now I bet you kind of want to know who the top 3 teams are, don't you? Or do you just want to go home and let it be life's mystery? Are you sure about that? You sure you want to know? Okay, now because I want to delay this and make this as suspenseful as possible, I'm going to describe to you how the top 3 teams were tabulated. Who groaned? Come on, we need to know how this is done. So all your written scores, those tests that you took out there on that very nice, somewhat rainy day, those were used in tabulation of this result, and your oral presentation score from this morning was used in that result. Now, once we announce these winners and the top 3 teams are brought back, the oral presentation score from this morning will be dropped, and they will get a new oral presentation score, okay? And so they'll add that to that written test, those 5-part tests, and then we're going to add that new oral presentation score to determine today's ranking in the top 3 winners. So I'm going to call these numbers in random order, no particular order. And when I call your team number, we want you to come and go right over there by that exit sign. And now, folks, the teams have done something really big and really awesome. So when I call those numbers, I want you to be as loud as you possibly can. And if you break a window in this building because you have screamed and cheered and clapped so loudly for your friends, it's okay, we have insurance. So, like, let's try to bust some windows and really be proud of the people that have won this competition or are going to be in the top 3. Again, this is no random order. And Katie, if you want to come out and greet our teams by the exit door, that would be great. Can I get a drum roll, please? The first team. Do we have anybody else who wants to make this suspenseful? Anybody at all? Hey, you know what? I got a dad joke here. Do you want me to read that? Okay, we won't do that. All right. In no particular order, team number 22. All right. The next team is team number 2235. And our final team, I'm going to give you guys a clue, okay? The first two numbers are 22. How about number 2233? All right, let's clap them out, folks, really loud. Okay, while our friends are going out to prepare their presentations, we have an opportunity to hear from one of our favorite sponsors with the NCF Envirothon. I know that this sponsor is a great partner to us here in Ohio, and I know that they sponsor and support Envirothon throughout the country. With us today, we have the Senior Director of Environmental Affairs for Smithfield Companies. He's located right here in Ohio, right here in Cincinnati, actually, which for those of you who may not know Ohio that well, it's about 45 minutes away. So he's very, very close, and he's a very good friend of ours. He's from the University of Iowa. He has a degree in chemical engineering, and he has a master's degree in environmental engineering as well. He also has a professional engineer's license. He has spent the last 16 years with Smithfield, but before that, he was spent 9 years with Tyson and 9 years with IBP. And you know, one of my questions is, when you work for a company like Smithfield, did you grow up on a farm? And he didn't. So, and to me, that tells us that we can all be a part of this amazing industry and work in conservation and environmental engineering and environmental issues. So I am very, very, very pleased to introduce Mr. John Meyer.
And the clicker thing?
That's you, right?
Yeah, that'd be it.
That'd be it. Slideshow.
Okay. Hold on, just the clicker is
Right here. I'm gonna do advance, I think it's
outside.
this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, right there.
Right here. We're gonna figure this out. It's gonna be okay. So technology, what a great auditorium and a beautiful screen. My goodness, this is amazing. So, and anyway, so in keeping with the waste to resources theme of Envirothon this year, I'm going to talk about our zero waste to landfill initiative. So first, just a few things about Smithfield itself. You can click. I'll just do it this way. There we go. Okay. We will manually click through this. This is good. So So basically, the largest pork producer in the United States, and we're part of the WH Group, which is on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So we're truly an international company, and our products are things that you probably have had multiple times: Smithfield hams, Eckrich smoked sausage, Nathan's hot dogs, healthy ones. That's all us, right? And these are our core brands. It's interesting. So Smithfield is based in Smithfield, Virginia. Eckrich is part of the old Armor Eckrich group. And again, they make smoked sausage in Junction City, Kansas. Anybody from Kansas here? There you go. Very cool. Nathan's hot dogs, we actually make those right here in our Springdale, Ohio facility. So just, again, about 30 miles away from here. And we partner with Nathan's. They own the brand, but we make it for them. We market it and distribute for Nathan's hot dogs. And then Farmland Foods, that's based in Kansas City. And Farmer John is out in LA. And John Morell, again, is here right in town. Carando is out in the state of Massachusetts. Curly's is in Iowa, around Sioux City, Iowa. And then these last couple, Morlini, Krakus, and Berlinki, are from our Poland facilities. So we've got 12 facilities in Poland over in Europe. So, and then actually 2 in Romania, 1 in Hungary, and another one in the Slovak Republic. So we're truly international. Plus, we've got joint ventures in Mexico as well. So that's a little bit about us. And this is who we sell our products to. So you'll see pretty much anybody and everybody that is in the food industry in the United States is people that we sell to. So we're out there. And so our mission is to produce good food the right way with respect to our people, animals, community, and the planet. And so our vision is with our culture of responsibility and operational excellence and innovation, we'll be the trusted food and protein company as we sustainably feed people around the world. So it's truly a calling for us to that is our vision, and we fulfill that every day. Again, over 50,000 employees here in the United States, 45 operating facilities plus distribution centers. It's a way of life. So good is what we do. We try to make a difference also, again, with respect to the animals, animal care, the care for the workers, care for the communities, care for the environment. We try to make a difference in all we do. So good is what we do. That's one of our slogans. And so at Smithfield, we make more than just good food, and we make a difference. Jobs, stewards to the environment, good communities, integral part of who we are. So guiding principles, again, this is a little bit of corporate stuff, but I think it's important because this zero waste to landfill initiative that we had hits all of these, right? It's a responsible thing to do. It's part of operational excellence because there's cost savings initiatives as well associated with it, and it truly is innovation. So what are our targets, right? What are we trying to do here? Well, we're on the way to achieving 75% reduction of solid waste to landfill compared to our baseline year of 2010. So we're 12 years into it. We got 3 more to go, and we're doing pretty well so far. A couple other goals that we have is to achieve 90% recyclable, reusable, and industrial compostable packages by 2030, and then have virgin petroleum plastics used by 2030. These are just a couple of our sustainability goals. We have others with food loss and waste reduction. We've got others with greenhouse gas emission reduction. We've got huge programs for a lot of different things, but we're going to talk about our zero waste to landfill program today. So how do you get there? Like, what's the process? What does it mean to be zero waste to landfill? So we define it internally that you don't send anything to landfill for 12 months in a row. So it can't be just 1 month and go back to putting stuff into the landfill. It's got to be a sustained program, and we audit it every month, and we make sure that we fulfill that. Minimum 10% reduction in total waste from our baseline, recycle or reuse greater than 50% of the waste, and the total cost basically has to be cost neutral. It can be a little bit above, 5% above what the baseline cost is, but effectively it has to be cost neutral. So, when did we start this whole thing? We started basically out in 2012. We came up with the thought process of having one zero waste to landfill facility by 2018. And this is actually in Peru, Indiana. So anybody from Indiana? Couple, there you go. So that's great. And so Peru is just north of Indianapolis, north of Kokomo. And they took the initiative and became our first zero waste to landfill facility. And then after that, again, by 2018, we wanted one. We had 12 facilities by 2018. And right now we have 21 of our 45 or so operating facilities, 50 if you include distribution centers, zero waste to landfill. So we're really making a mark, you know, relative to our peers in the industry. Yeah, we're miles ahead of them. So how do you do it, right? What's the process that you go through to try to get to zero waste to landfill? Well, does anybody know what a BHAG is? Anybody heard of that acronym? It's a big, hairy, audacious goal. You have to dream it, right? You have to want to get there, and then form cross-functional teams. You got to have a team leader. Top management support is absolutely critical for this. The plant manager has to be involved and has to want this to occur, and you have to get buy-in from all the facility team members, and then partner with recycling firms that'll take darn near everything. So. And that's what we do. So we try to look at our waste as not a waste, right? It's what do they say? One man's trash is another's treasure. So we try to find an outlet for all of the waste products that we have throughout the production manufacturing operations and find a home for it that's useful. So we document our baseline year. And then we do the same on our landfill-free use, and we do that comparison, right, of cost and of how much is being recycled and how much isn't. You got to keep a ton of records, shipping records, transporters, recycling facilities, certifications, all that kind of stuff. So it is a process, and we document everything on, it's called Power BI. We've got a waste report that we do monthly metrics on. So again, how do we do it? Well, the very first thing that you want to do when you try to get to zero waste to landfill is don't generate the waste in the first place, right? So source reduction is always the first thing that you try to do. And so this is just an example of reusable bins. And so a lot of times, and we previously had cardboard combos, right, that had strapping around it, that had the plastic liners and a pallet underneath it, a wooden pallet underneath it. Well, we're getting rid of darn near all of that when we use and reuse these washable plastic reusable bins and just use those throughout the process. The other initiative that we have in our operating facilities is to eliminate wood products, because wood can be a contaminant, obviously, and it also, you know, splinters and gets on the ground, and it's just kind of a pain. And so these have, you know, I don't know if you can kind of see down below, but you can stick a fork truck underneath these things, so you don't need a wood pallet associated with it. You don't need the strapping around it. So it's fully self-contained. So, and then the other part of it is make it easier for people to do the right thing than the wrong thing, right? To put it in the right place to be recycled versus putting it in the wrong place and have it go to the landfill. So we try to do that at our operating facilities throughout the US, and again, we have it in different languages, right? And we have to try to do pictures, and we have to have receptacles for it to go the right way. So this is just a picture. We're going to go through a couple pictures of kind of the things that we do. And cardboard is huge because, again, for that cost effectiveness deal that we've got going, it's got to be cost neutral, you know, plus or minus 5%. This is a huge way of getting there. Cardboard, especially baled, goes for about $150 a ton. And so if we can effectively take any and all cardboard that was going to the landfill, bale it or put it into a compactor, sell it as a product, get $150 a ton for it, right? That funds a lot of the other things that we need to do that cost money to get to zero waste to landfill. So this is our funding source, and we got to make sure that 100% of our cardboard actually does get recycled and none of it goes over into the bin that goes to the landfill. So metals too, metals, especially stainless steel, is astronomical price-wise. You get a great rebate for metals. And so we got to make sure that we recycle 100% of our metals and actually separate out the carbon steel from the stainless steel, right? Because you get a better price for stainless steel than you do for carbon steel. So again, that's a revenue source, and we got to make sure that we recycle our metal. And wood scraps, again, we're trying to get rid of it at all of our operating facilities, but right now we still have some, and you can send this to a chipper and it can go to a compost facility. We have programs with pallet suppliers, but if there's a broken pallet, they'll take it back, they'll repair it, and then they'll bring us new ones. And so, we try to do and recycle and reuse our pallets as well. And then plastics recycling, this is kind of one of the tough ones for us. They will take clean, like LDP, low density polyethylene. It's a type of plastic that people like, but really they don't give you a whole lot of money for it these days. And so it's tough to recycle plastics, and especially what we call protein contaminated plastics. And so if it's got a little bit of purge or blood on it, just nobody wants this stuff. So then this is a kind of a cool thing that we do. And we started this actually in 2012 as well. We take a lot of our wastewater sludges that are organic in nature, and we land apply that. And so the farmers love it. Actually, it's a free organic fertilizer for them, and it's a soil augmenter. And this is something that we do actually throughout the United States. Okay, composting is another part of what we do also. Food waste, plastics, basically just, again, anything kind of organic can go to a compost facility. Anaerobic digestion, this is really interesting actually, because again, this gets into our greenhouse gas reduction process. We can generate renewable natural gas off of anaerobic bacteria that then generate methane, biogas that is mostly methane. You strip out everything that isn't methane, and you can inject that into a natural gas pipeline as renewable natural gas. And it's worth about 20 times what normal natural gas is. So this is a big money maker for us. We're spending millions and millions of dollars, actually close to $500 million on covering up anaerobic lagoons that are covering up lagoons that are at our hog farms and our operating facilities, and again, generating this biogas that then becomes renewable natural gas. So, but we can take some of our organic waste to these as well. So there's commercial anaerobic digesting companies as well. So even if we don't have a farm or an actual facility that has a rendering facility there, we can actually take it to a commercial anaerobic digestion process. And then last but not least, if for everything else, and that's typically only like 5-10% of our overall waste product, typically it has to go to a waste to energy facility. And what that is again, instead of a landfill, you burn the trash and you generate electricity off of that. So there's commercial folks around the United States that do that as well for us again, but we try to recycle everything and minimize this because this costs a lot of money and a lot more than it costs to send stuff to the landfill. So South Dakota folks, anybody from South Dakota? Nobody from South Dakota. Well, this is our Sioux Falls facility. It's one of our largest one, second largest next to Tar Heel, North Carolina. And I just wanted to highlight a couple things that they do. It's huge. They employ over 3,800 people at this one plant. It's 105 acres, 2 million square feet of operating capacity at this location. They harvest over to 20,000 head a day there, produce 1.6 billion pounds of product, and purchase and use a little under 2 million gallons of water a day. So it's a very, very large facility, sits on the Big Sioux River that runs around it. And but some of the things that we did, again, started in 2012. This is a program where all of our wastewater sludges were going to the landfill. And I went, gosh, that's not the right way to do this. And so we partnered with a firm that helps us out and finds farmers that want this material, and will transport it over to these locations. And then when the crops are out of the fields, right? So once in the spring, once in the fall, we do land application. And again, this for us, 2.4 million pounds a month used to go to the landfill and is now going, again, as a soil augmenter and a natural fertilizer to fields around northwest Iowa. So that's a big thing. And again, cardboard recycling, they do a great job. You know, almost 600,000 pounds of cardboard is recycled from this facility every month. It is staggering, right? So we do have a second objective, which is on a normalized basis, to reduce the amount of tons of solid waste going to the landfill by 75%. So production increases. When production increases over time, you know, you generate more waste, so we have to kind of normalize that. But our baseline was 2010, and we sent 182 million pounds of solid waste to the landfill. It's a lot, right? Seems like an incredible amount, but that was based off of a production volume of almost 10 billion pounds. So a baseline of 1.9 normalized solid waste to the landfill per 100 weight of production. So this is kind of where we're at right now. Last year we sent, again, remember the number was 182 million pounds. This last year we were under 100. So of actual solid waste to the landfill. Our production volume had increased, and so our normalized number is 0.85. Well, again, it was 1.9 or so, so 55% reduction normalized over that 11-year period of time. So we're well on our way. We're not to 75% yet. We've got a couple more years before 2025, so we're going to do our best to hit that sustainability goal as well. So the benefits of the overall program, you know, are huge, right? Landfills have a set amount of space. I know you guys have been looking at the Rumpke landfill. I just went by that facility just on my way up here today. We know the Rumpkes. I talk to Adam Rumpke all the time. He's a good partner for us. And they do nice things on recycling as well. But you know, to the extent we can, we're going to eliminate landfill use, find beneficial reuse of waste materials, cost savings initiatives, like I mentioned before. Oh, by the way, that land application process up in Sioux Falls saves at least $600,000, $700,000 per year for that one facility up in Sioux Falls by taking it, what was going to the landfill, and then sending it to land application. So it's huge cost savings initiative as well. Stakeholder interest, the people that we sell our meat to, they love this. They think it's great, right? They go, you know, go Smithfield, and because it's in line with their sustainability goals as well. So anytime, you know, you produce a product and you sell it to somebody, if they have certain goals for sustainability, you want to be in lockstep with them, right? And so we are on this and a lot of other initiatives. So again, the Walmarts and the Krogers and the main customers that we have, the McDonald's of the world. So that's stakeholder interest, and then just employee pride in the achievement. I talk to these facilities that are zero waste to landfill, and I'll talk to folks on the production floor and throughout, and they really think it's a great thing. So they're very, very proud on an individual plant basis for being zero waste to landfill, and they think it's a cool thing that we do, you know, for Smithfield. So they have a lot of pride in it. And again, it's the right thing to do. So that's what we have on zero waste to landfill. And I hope you enjoyed it. Do you guys have any questions or anything? Be happy to take a question or two if you had anything. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, well, you know, clearly that's important in everything, but definitely, you know, we want to find a good partner for recycling. So we want to find actually a company that'll help us out with a lot of different types of materials to recycle, and one that's very stable themselves, right? So they'll be there for 5, 10, 15 years and be our partner. And they need to be innovative as well and try to find better ways of recycling and better ways of using more of our stuff that we consider waste that would otherwise go to the waste to energy facility. So a lot of it is just partnering with the right people that are, again, have the same common goals that we have. And certainly money is part of it, but what they do with it is very important as well. So we want to make sure that they're trustworthy partners. So, go ahead. Plant-based protein. So we have a facility in Kansas City, and we have a product line of plant-based protein products that are produced in Kansas City under Kansas City Sausage. So you can find them at Kroger, among other places. But yes, yeah. Uh, Pure Farms, yeah. Pure Farm line, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, that's a great question. And again, that's part of our overall audit program. So that's when I was talking about having partners that are trustworthy, right? That's a lot of it. So yes, we do audit the facilities that we send material to for recycling to make sure that they actually do recycle it. That's correct. Yeah, thank you. Go ahead. That's a good question. It's a little off topic, but it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, that's been big news in North Carolina for a good period of time. And so, again, we try to do things the right way. And so, and continue to try to innovate. So the biggest thing that we try to do is make sure that the lagoons that we have for hog waste, that again, that we're covering it, right? So it doesn't smell, because basically methane, if it goes into the atmosphere, right, it smells like rotten eggs, right? Well, if you cover those anaerobic lagoons and you harvest then the biogas, again, it becomes renewable natural gas, but also there's no smell associated with it, right? And so that's part of what we do. And then we have folks on the hog production group side that are absolute professionals in ensuring that when we do land application of waste, that we do it agronomically. So we have certified agronomists that check the soils to make sure that we're not overloading it with any nitrogen or phosphorus or any potassium or anything else, so that it's, again, good for the farms. So, it's kind of an ongoing discussion. And we really just have to get the word out about how we actually do our business, because if people really knew, that the measures that we take in order to be environmentally sound, a lot of that talk would go away. But they just don't know, you know. Go ahead. Yeah. So our goal, we do have a carbon negative goal, and again, how we're going to achieve it by 2030, again, to be carbon neutral, carbon negative, right, is again primarily associated with our farms and covering these lagoons. Because if we do that, and we are, and we will fulfill that goal, that's going to get us to neutrality. Because again, all of that carbon, right? Understand that methane has a factor of like 27 CO2, right? So its greenhouse gas emission potential is 27 times what carbon dioxide is, that's methane. And so if you can cover those lagoons and not emit the methane into the atmosphere, like it has tremendous benefits associated with it. Again, 27 times the reduction that you get by not burning gasoline or natural gas at a facility. But we try to do at our operating facilities, we track our natural gas and electrical use also, and try to make ways of making our operating facilities more efficient relative to our energy use as well. But the farms is the big way of doing it, right? Covering the lagoons. I don't have the numbers. I'm just a poor environmental guy. I don't know how much we give to lobbies. I really don't. But thank you. Thanks for the question. Was there another one over here? Yeah, the animal feedlots or the hog growing operations. Again, that's this lagoon thing that we're doing, and that's innovative, and we're probably maybe a third of the way there. We've got a lot way to go. We got a lot more of these lagoons to cover. But again, once we have all these lagoons covered, not only do you decrease greenhouse gas emissions, right? Make it less smelly for neighbors, okay? You also reduce the potential of floods, right? Okay, so climate change, right? Hurricanes are coming to North Carolina at a lot more frequent basis. Rainfalls are up in a very short period of time. It's a huge amount of water. Sometimes we get rains in North Carolina where it's 24 inches of rain in 30 hours or so. Well, with these lagoons, when they weren't covered, guess what? Those 24 inches of rain would go directly into the lagoons, and they would have the potential of overflowing and getting into streams. And obviously, we don't want that to happen. We try our best, and we do a very, very good job of keeping those lagoon levels low. But with them covered like that, it's like no potential. All of it sheets off, right? And stormwater stays clean stormwater, and none of it gets into our lagoons. And so, again, there's just multiple benefits associated with it's called Smithfield Renewables. And our friend Craig Westerbeek runs that program, and he does a super nice job. So that's how we're going to get to carbon neutrality. That's how we're trying to meet our greenhouse gas emission goals. There you go. Good question. Yeah. Okay, sorry, go ahead. Cardboard bales? Yeah, so you can have downstroke balers, right? Where you basically put in the sheet of cardboard and then it compresses it, right? Or you got horizontal balers that'll do it kind of automatically. And so it'll feed up a conveyor belt, and then it'll form a bale, after it compresses it, and it'll actually auto tie it as well. So it's kind of cool. The horizontal ones take more room, they're bigger, but for large facilities that we have, they're the best way, and it's less labor intensive as well. So, but then again, you get maximum benefit associated with cardboard if it's baled, a little bit less, but still good if it's compacted. So a compactor, it's got a ram on a hydraulic ram, and basically you just compact it into an area, but it's not baled. It doesn't have bale wire around it. So that's good. And you can have it loose and going into an open top dumpster and have that, but that doesn't give you the value out of it. And then you're shipping air. It's not compacted well enough. So, good question. Go ahead. So not on a large commercial basis. No. I mean, certainly, small farmers can do it around, but the potential of disease under that scenario is in my opinion, is far greater than a more controlled way that we do it. So you hear about that all the time over in China. They get all these different kind of diseases in their pigs that they have to wipe out a third or half of their overall sources. And part of the reason why is they don't have good controls over there, right? And because it's all like onesie twosies in a backyard or down in somebody's basement, or whatever. So that's we believe it's a better way of doing it this way. And we've spent millions and millions of dollars, Smithfield has, of creating gestation pens that are larger and better for the animals. It's outside what? Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, basically, do you have a third-party certifier for zero waste to landfill, or do we self-certify? I think is the question. And so we actually do self-certify. But to be honest, a lot of our rules and the way that we do this are a lot more stringent than some of the third-party ones, because I've looked at that, and I've looked at some of these national certification stuff where it says you're a zero landfill and you can still send 10% of your waste to the landfill. I'm going, that doesn't make any sense. But anyway, so we do self-certify. Okay, well, hey guys, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So. Yeah, no problem.
Safe travels.
Okay, see you guys.
All right, friends, let's give John a big round of applause. I don't know about you, but I learned one very important thing listening to John's presentation. I learned that I'm not going to allow any of you to ask me any questions. My goodness, those were some great questions that came from the crowd here, so thank you for those. As you might imagine, the teams are still back there prepping, so this is a really great time to get up and go to the restroom if you need to go to the restroom, because once they start their presentation, we will shut those doors and you won't be able to get back in. In the meantime, I've been here for a week. Who's been here for a week? There are a lot of us who have been here for a week. Who has a dog back home that they're missing? I do too. I have a couple kids and I kind of miss them somewhat. They're about your age, so you can understand why I just kind of miss them. But I also have 3 puppies at home. I have 2 dachshunds and a husky, and I kind of miss them. And my dachshund, he's pretty smart. My boy dachshund, his name is Leo. And I asked him what 2 minus 2 was, and he told me nothing. All right, I will be back in just a couple minutes, and we'll introduce the next team. So everybody hang tight for a second. Hey guys, we have about a 5-minute warning, so if your friends have left this room, please ask them to come back so that we can get ready. Two-minute warning, friends. So let's get everybody back in the room because we don't want any movement when our presenters are up here. All right, we're about ready to get started again. I do want to take a moment to introduce our judges today, and these people have shared their time and their talents with us today, so I want you to give them a super big round of applause as I introduce each one of them. The first up, I want to introduce our timekeepers. Our timekeepers have been so great for us this morning, and we picked one to call up to the big leagues. It's Deb Bigelow. Deb is awesome. Deb, please stand up and get a round of applause. Yep. Deb, we're going to ask that you start the time once the students introduce themselves, okay? Okay, so first up we have Melissa Grosvenor. Melissa is the naturalist from the Greene County Parks and Trails. Next, we have the fabulous Etta Reed, who is chair of the Ohio Soil and Water Conservation Commission. Next up is Jeremy Peters, Chief Executive Officer of NACD and the NCF Executive Director. We have a great friend to us here in the state of Ohio, our state conservationist for USDA NRCS, John Wilson. Next, we have Brooke Wynn, the Senior Director of Sustainability for Smithfield Foods. And Dan Wickerham, the Director of the Brown County Solid Waste District. And finally, we have Cecil Okta, the Program Assistant for the Environmental Professionals Network. And I would love to give our first team a giant recognition, but I only know them as Team 2235. So if they would please join me on the stage, we'll get started.
You let them know when you're ready to begin after you introduce yourself, okay? Yes, yes, they have a few minutes to, okay?
All right. Microphone's right here. Do you want a handout?
Oh, and there's another mic over there. There's another mic? Oh. Okay. Is that mic hooked up?
Okay, so can you use that one?
Yeah. Hello, we are Team 2235, and my name is Luke.
I'm Eli.
I'm Sabina.
I'm Alexa. And I'm Isabel.
And I think we're ready to begin. We just go for it. Okay, so good morning, judges. Good morning, everyone else. It's not morning anymore. I'm so sorry. Good afternoon. Okay, I am the head of the environmental engineering firm hired by Rumpke to build a more efficient access road to the Bond Road landfill. With me is the rest of my team.
I'm Eli. I'm the civil engineer.
I'm Sabina, the environmental engineer.
I'm Alexa, the environmental consultant. And I'm Isabel, the social media manager.
So our goal is to provide a comprehensive plan to build the road while also maintaining environmental health and ensuring that the community maintains a high quality of life. So, what exactly are we trying to do? Well, the current access to the landfill is preventing it from meeting the community's needs. Under its current solid waste permit, it can only accept 100 tons of waste per day. Our goal is to increase that to 300 to 400 tons per day, while also increasing jobs in the community at the same time. We do expect construction to have an environmental impact, which we also hope to mitigate through best management practices. We also want to make sure our citizens feel heard because we feel that it is incredibly important to maintain trust with the community, and that we will do that by addressing their concerns, such as flooding and others. This is essential to building a strong bond with the people directly involved in the impacts of our decisions. So, with these approaches in mind, there is a wide variety of factors affecting both each other and the issues at hand. For aquatic resources, Stream and surface water quality is paramount, as is that of groundwater, which is especially susceptible to contamination by leachate. For forestry, a perimeter of trees around the facility could serve as a valuable barrier for noise and pollution, as well as slowing runoff. Soil characteristics and topology are essential to choosing the right location for the road, and plants and wildlife must always be at the forefront of considerations for all actions taken to preserve native and endangered species. Of course, waste-to-energy initiatives such as methane capture from the landfill itself are also crucial for a successful plan. All of these considerations and more come together to form our plan for building this new road in the most environmentally, politically, economically, and socially conscious manner possible. The first step is surveying the site. So prior to construction, we plan to conduct a series of assessments to protect rare species and significant archaeological locations. As per the Natural Resource Conservation Service's bat conservation measures, we must determine if suitable bat habitats are on site. If so, we must adequately preserve or relocate them to a safer location. Similarly, for biodiversity in general, we must know and preserve wildlife hubs and important habitats in the area and ensure that they are either relocated or protected. For the many archaeological sites of Ohio, such as the mounds made by the Native American tribes, such as the Adena Hopewell, these are of great cultural and historical significance, so we must protect them. And we will do this by conducting an archaeological survey, measuring them out, and ensuring that we do not disturb them.
So, being the civil engineer, my main goal was to assess the soil and topography of the region. And I did this by consulting the Hamilton County Soil Survey. So what we found is that the majority of all the soils in this region were rated very limited for public, local road and street construction. And this was largely due to the fact that the predominant soils in the region, like the Eden silty clay loam and the Switzerland silt loam, were very prone to frost action and had very high shrink swell potentials. So essentially what this means is that the volume of the soil could change very easily. And this happens as water infiltrates the soil and enters the pores. So as water enters the pores, the soil expands, and as it freezes, it expands even more. And when the soil dries, then it shrinks. Now the issue with this is if we're trying to build a road and we build the road over this soil, then the road will deform as it shrinks or expands responding to the soil. All the soils depicted above, they're well drained. However, they do have high runoff and erosion potentials, with the exception of the Switzerland silt loam that has moderate erosion potential. Both Switzerland soils have moderate slopes, while the Eden soil is very steep. And additionally, these soils have ponding frequencies and flooding frequencies that are extremely low, which will help address citizen concerns of flooding, particularly those of the ditch dump. As you can see from the depiction of the topographic map, the red line is our road path, the green line is the landfill site, the black dot is our parking lot, and the yellow dot is the new landfill entrance. So for context, the bending lines are ridges and valleys, the looping lines are summits, the contours that are far apart are gradual slopes, and those that are close together are the steeper slopes. So we decided to construct our road along the contours in a way that minimizes transport over really steep slopes and maximizes transport over flat, low-lying valleys. This will allow smoother transport, allowing more trucks to enter the landfill on a day-by-day basis. And also, we constructed it in a manner that avoids interfering with the native mounds, which helps preserve the vibrant cultural landscape. Since Eden soils are very steep, most of the road, along with the entire parking lot, will be constructed on the Switzerland soil, which is much flatter. Also, to address frost action and the shrink swell potential limitation, we could minimize this by compacting the soil directly underneath the road, which was recommended by Jessica Burns, a soil conservationist of the NRCS. And by compacting the soil directly underneath the road, we will also be increasing the soil strength by enhancing the bulk density, which is essentially dry weight over volume. And since all the soils in this area where the road will be are well drained, we can plant vegetation roadside, creating roadside buffer strips, which will help to decrease runoff and erosion, which were two major limitations. And while this site has limited excavation potential, it's not too big of a deal for us because the soil the road is going over has too low of a clay content to be useful in stockpiling or covering the landfill on a day-by-day basis.
Okay, so I'm the environmental engineer and I'm in charge of landfill and site operations. We can use best management practices to make the construction and short-term use of the road more sustainable. Placing buffer strips of forest and vegetation along the road and streams will reduce soil erosion and runoff. To prevent sediment and dust pollution, which impact soil and water quality in nearby streams, we'll spray construction sites with water. Avoiding the use of heavy equipment during and after rain will prevent soil compaction. Also, using recycled glass and asphalt and following the 4 R's of waste management, reduce, reuse, recycle, and repurpose wherever possible, will minimize the project's waste stream. Finally, we should reduce the area disturbed by construction to protect wildlife habitat. To operate a municipal solid waste landfill like Bond Road, we'll need to follow regulations and guidelines set by the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act and Hamilton County's Solid Waste Management District. We should also implement long-term best management practices to maintain the site and protect environmental and human health. The new extension currently being planned for the landfill will decrease the amount of leachate, which is water that trickles through the landfill and becomes contaminated by chemicals in garbage that needs to be collected. However, leachate collection systems are still very much needed to remove it from the landfill to reduce the risks of it seeping through the liner and contaminating nearby soil and groundwater. In the case any leachate does escape, groundwater and surface water monitoring should be done both upstream and downstream of Bond Road. Leachate can also be recirculated into the landfill, which not only reduces the amount that has to be sent to a wastewater treatment plant, but also decreases the risk of subterranean reactions. This is when anaerobic decomposition of waste inside the landfill produces methane, a flammable gas that can cause explosions when combined with oxygen. The more leachate, the less room for oxygen pockets in between pieces of garbage, and thus the less risk for damage caused by subterranean reactions. Methane should also be monitored with wells and probes, as well as collected with pipes that go into the landfill. It can then be sold as a profit source to fund the road construction or other Rumpke projects. Another option for methane is to send it to an energy recovery facility to remove contaminants and burn it, producing electricity to power Rumpke garbage trucks, the landfill, or even nearby homes. Additionally, with more waste coming to the landfill, a daily cover will be needed to control odor, pests, and litter. Odor can also be controlled by collecting certain gas byproducts of waste decomposition with wells and a blower, flare, or vacuum system. The site should also be maintained beyond RCRA landfill regulations. Again, any construction or processes that will produce dust can be sprayed with water to protect water resources. Precautions should also be taken to manage areas of the site that have been disturbed by construction. According to Daniel Thompson, a wildlife expert, disturbed sites are easily overtaken by invasive species, so monitoring should be done to prevent the spread of species like bush honeysuckle or Callery pear. If the plants are small, they can be controlled with physical methods, and herbicides can control them if they grow too large.
As the environmental consultant, I'll be addressing measures that we can take to improve habitat, wildlife diversity, and aesthetics at the site once construction is completed. First, planting a perimeter of trees around the site will reduce noise escaping to the community, hide unsightly views, filter air and runoff, and create valuable edge habitat for edge species like white-tailed deer and wild turkey. Further, these trees could be planted by volunteers or students as a community service or education initiative. In these perimeters, native oak and gum trees should be maintained as they grow very well in southwestern Ohio, which has led to a concentration of oak gum forests in Hamilton County. Maintaining these oak and gum trees will lead to production of both hard mast in the form of acorns from the oaks and soft mast from the gum trees, which will attract a wide diversity of wildlife that consume both hard and soft mast. In addition, spring ephemeral flowers planted around the perimeter and throughout the site will attract pollinators that feed on the flowers' nectar and pollen, creating very much needed pollinator habitats. Another improvement we can make is turning the existing man-made pond on the newly purchased land to a man-made wetland, which has numerous benefits such as slowing runoff, allowing more water to infiltrate, acting as a sink for nutrients and pollutants carried by the water, and providing habitat for wildlife. Another improvement to the site would be planting the endangered running buffalo clover on slopes, which it grows very well on, to reduce soil erosion by keeping the soil covered and increase numbers of this endangered species. As a final improvement, we would ensure that there are many unbroken stretches of trees running all the way through the site to create habitat corridors that animals can use to migrate between habitats, thereby reducing habitat fragmentation. Now, all of those improvements will improve the entire landfill while it is active. And then what about once it's inactive? Well, once the landfill reaches its capacity and closes, methane, leachate, and groundwater monitoring will be conducted for at least 30 years as required by RCRA. And also per RCRA requirements, the final cover will consist of a plastic liner, compacted clay, geotextile, and an infiltration and erosion layer to support native plant life. Post-closure, the Bond Road landfill can be converted into a recreational park, as is also the plan for the nearby Coleraine landfill. And these two parks together could create an entire network of community parks built on former landfills to show citizens how landfills can ultimately serve as an asset to their community. And this beautiful park will increase their property values rather than decreasing them as they may be concerned about. In addition to field trips, tours, and educational initiatives like summer camps at the active landfill site, the park created once the landfill is closed can continue hosting educational seminars explaining not only the science behind landfills, but proper waste disposal practices, like how to recycle, how to compost, and then what to actually send to the landfill. And our goal with this would be to reduce the amount of trash sent to the landfill, since reduction is the #1 waste management strategy on the EPA's waste management hierarchy. Reducing the amount of waste sent to the landfill will also allow it and other landfills in the area to serve the community for much longer, since they won't fill up as fast, and not as many landfills will have to be constructed if the existing ones can last longer.
So as a social media manager, I am trying to make sure that throughout the project's progression, we have a wide and very well-founded community support system. So if we approach the problem already having community support, we will limit any conflicts that may occur between interest groups. So we'll start by reaching out to local politicians to make sure they both understand and are willing to advocate for our project. The local government's large audience can help us widen the berth of our outreach. And in addition, a very user-friendly website can help us list accomplishments, reasons, methods that are accurate information we can disseminate to the public. So this will both raise public trust and ensure the accuracy of the information that is out in the world. And now in the 21st century, given the risk of misinformation, we want to make sure that, especially on social media, we have a very active presence. So we want to be posting and uploading stories as a very accessible way for an educated public to access resources. So during the actual construction, organizations such as Ditch the Dump and community members may raise concerns about the landfill negative impacts. So concerns may include health issues, watershed contamination, odor control, traffic, noise, and even harm to the economy. So we want to be transparent, establish trust, and enlist community endorsed figures. We want to still continue with our website, our social media, and political support. And association with local politicians and the local government is definitely the best way to make sure we have authority in the community. So having educated and trusted figures as available resources to the community can address community concerns in a very accessible way. And we have already solutions to potential problems that may come up. Once construction is complete, involving the community members through field trips to the site by elementary, middle, and high school students will make sure that we are really reaching the greatest audience possible and educating them successfully. So this will allow more community members, such as these two very egoistic figures, to be well informed about the landfill. And in addition, community service opportunities, such as cleanups, tree plantings, and even volunteering to host summer camps can help involve other members of the community and make them part of the Bond Road team. And adult field trips, also known as tours, can be given at the facility to make sure that anyone that wants to learn more about the landfill can just look up on our accessible website a date to go and see for themselves what is going on here. So all of these measures combined are sure to increase community support for Bond Road landfill, and the importance of this cannot be undermined, as an educated and supportive public will make the process run much smoother.
So here I am again, head of our environmental engineering firm, to kind of close things out. So to recap, our efforts today are aimed at addressing concerns surrounding the Bond Road landfill by adding a new road from a different entrance point. Doing so will allow Rumpke to more efficiently utilize the landfill while simultaneously mitigating environmental impacts of the project and ensuring that citizens in the area maintain a high quality of life. Performing a proper site assessment taking into consideration wildlife and surrounding land provides for minimal disruption of the surrounding ecosystem, as does following best management practices such as creating buffer strips along the roadside as it's built. Effectively maintaining the site with regular leachate monitoring, leachate, methane, groundwater, and surface water monitoring keeps quality of life in the area high and ensures utmost health and safety. Looking to the future, enhancing the site in the long term by adding native wildlife strategically improves biodiversity, making the ecosystem more robust and helping to mitigate pollution. Essential to all this is community support, enlisted through educational campaigns in partnership with local politicians. So, in conclusion, the combined effects of all these initiatives is sure to satisfy all parties involved for the present, while simultaneously ensuring a brighter, greener tomorrow. Thank you all so much, and here are our citations.
Judges, you have 10 minutes for questions.
Should we go up a little? Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So I heard you talk about your post construction plans with community engagement. Can you kind of talk about your strategies for pre-construction, how you are going to be engaging with community members prior to the construction being started?
Okay, so we will obviously, as a project, have a very planned out method for how we want to build this road and expand this land. And as part of that, we want to make sure that this plan is very transparent and is accessible to the public. So by telling them this is what we are going to do, and this is when we are going to do it, hopefully, and this is how we are going to do it, that we can make sure that the community is aware of what's going to happen. So again, these three ways of social media, user-friendly websites, and political support, and even town hall meetings or things like that, will be a way to get this information beyond the planning to the actual community, the town, the audience.
And we also wanted to increase communication with local politicians and help create educational programs through that for demographics that aren't as well-versed or use social media as intensely, so that way we could reach everyone and not just like the younger demographic or, yeah.
So our initiatives for pre-construction, we want to emphasize that they are especially tailored towards building community trust, because we know that this is a contentious issue. It's a whole not in my backyard thing, so we want to make sure that everyone knows exactly what's going to happen and what they can do to raise concerns.
Good afternoon. You guys are answering a lot of my questions as I was thinking them up, but there are a couple. You mentioned about adding native wildlife species to the area to increase the diversity there. What type of species were you considering?
Yes, definitely oak and gum trees. as the oak gum forest is already a very prolific forest in Hamilton County in southwestern Ohio, and these will increase wildlife diversity a lot because oaks produce hard mass while gums produce soft mass. So this attracts a wide variety of wildlife. And other native plants we really would strive to incorporate are the endangered bush, not the the endangered running buffalo clover, I mean, which grows very well on slopes. So it will definitely reduce erosion if we plant it on all those steep slopes that you saw on the topographic map, because if the land is covered with plants, the soil is much less likely to erode than if it were fallow. And in addition, the spring ephemeral flowers, which there are native species like the longflower trillium, will attract pollinators that feed on its pollen and nectar.
And also with regard to wildlife diversity, we know that wetlands are one of the most diverse habitats in the world. So our plan to kind of use the existing man-made pond on the facility and convert that over the years into an artificial wetland will also help in that regard.
Yes, I have a question for the engineer. Given that you're increasing the impervious surface on the property, and we know that the residents adjacent and downstream are concerned about flooding, how do you intend to take care of the increase in runoff?
Okay, so part of our plan was to create roadside buffer strips on both sides of our road, so that way it would help decrease the runoff potential. And then also one good thing about where we're building the road is that the soil, we checked in the soil survey, and they do have very low ponding and flooding frequencies. So that means in combination with the buffer and with the soil that is well drained and has a very low flooding potential, we think we can control the flooding.
And the man-made wetland and perimeter of trees, once they are established, will also help filter and reduce runoff.
Thank you.
We also talked about engaging the community with like projects and tours. So one idea for that could be to get community members involved in composting and educating them about how to compost, and then using that compost on the site to increase the water infiltration, which could help with runoff.
Team, thank you for your presentation. Can you talk a little bit more about endangered species mitigation and measures that you will take with some of the specific endangered species on the site?
So our bat survey will ensure that there are no endangered bat species on the site to worry about, or if they are, we will protect their habitats or relocate them. There's also the endangered running buffalo clover I mentioned, which we are going to plant to increase its numbers, simultaneously reducing erosion. In our pollinator habitat that I mentioned, that can attract various pollinators, including there are 8 endangered butterfly species in Ohio, including the Carner blue butterfly, which may be attracted to our pollinator habitat by our spring ephemeral flowers, which would also increase their numbers.
In addition, Rumpke already has programs to relocate any endangered species to different habitats. So were we to find a species and not be able to preserve their habitats, we would try to relocate them.
So yeah, you did a very good job covering a number of questions. You did talk about the route you chose, but I wonder if you could speak a little more about the alternatives you looked at to this route, because I'm sure that was a prime consideration.
Mm-hmm. So one of the major limitations were that there's a lot of very tall peaks. So we wanted to take the most direct route possible, but also avoid any super sharp turns. So we originally tried going left, but then we found we're too close to the Indiana-Ohio border, so then we would cross state lines, so we wanted to avoid that. And going right, then there is the Fox Run River, so we wanted to avoid building over the river. So we thought it best to navigate through the summits and peaks and go through the valleys, and in doing that, it's a more direct route. We're avoiding state lines, and we're avoiding the river.
And also when we were planning, we noticed, looking at the soil map, that there was only really this one particular stretch of the land that we constructed our road into that actually did not have as severe limitations for building. So this also takes into consideration that and plans to build the road specifically on that stretch of soil.
Yeah, the strip we built the road on, like the vast majority of it is the Switzerland Silt Loam Road, and that has far less limitations in terms of steepness, so we thought it best to build the road there.
Also, the main problem with the current entrance is that there's a very sharp turn, or many of them, that are hard for large garbage trucks to pass through. So in building this new road to increase utilization of the landfill, we really want to reduce the sharp turns and sharp high peaks that the trucks would have to go through so that they can carry more trash to the landfill and increase its efficiency and utilization.
Hi, your presentation has been wonderful. I do have a concern about the possibility of finding endangered bats and relocating them. Would that possibly cause more stress on their population and have a negative effect? And I'm also wondering too if they might have a fidelity to a certain roost and they may want to continue to return. And I just wonder if your plan has any, anything that you can consider that possibility.
Right, so I'm pretty sure it's well researched that bats, when they're relocated or when they're pushed away from their habitats, usually they're settling there because it's the most optimal habitat they could find. And in breaking up their roosts and their social groups, then they split up, and so their roosting sites are less ideal. Unfortunately, that is a problem that we currently have, but given the large efforts to kind of, first we want to see if they're there, and if they are there, we will see, sadly, kind of a decline in the idealness of the transportation of the bats, the relocation, but unfortunately that is something we would have to do.
Yes, and the first thing we would do with regard to the bats is follow all actions in line with the Natural Resource Conservation Service's bat conservation measures. So when doing our survey for that, we would do everything that we can to ensure that they are not disturbed. Yeah.
Got 30 seconds. Thank you for your presentation.
All right, this is one of your top 3 teams. How about a big thunderous round of applause? Go on the backside, maybe. For the record, the judges aren't allowed to ask me any questions either. I don't know about you guys, but I have walked a lot. Who has walked a lot this week? I looked at getting a bicycle because I thought maybe that would help because I'm already at 13,000 steps, but it wouldn't stand up by itself. It was too tired. That was for you, Millie. All right, we'll have a couple minutes before our second team gets up here, and we'll be back in order. All right, ladies and gentlemen, team number 2233.
Yeah, hold on. Yes.
No, I'm going to stop you. Okay. And I will not start the time until after you introduce it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Wait. You don't actually have. On your side. Sorry. Okay.
Hi, I'm Neri. I'm Caroline.
Hi, I'm Robin. I'm Eileen.
And I'm Jamie.
What? Take that mic. Is everyone ready? Cool. Hello, everyone. We are Greenway Solutions, and we are here today to help you with the Sand Run Road entrance. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are currently on Indigenous Miami land, and I'd like to pay my highest respects and honors to both the people and the land itself. We'll begin with a quick overview of our agenda. First, we'll review the problem, then evaluate the site. Thirdly, go over our route proposal, and lastly, go over our suggestions to help reduce the impacts on the environment. Why construct a road? Here's the situation. Currently, your road is both unsafe and ineffective. After the acquisition of this new parcel of land, you'll be able to construct a new entrance and road to the landfill site, which is what we'll be helping you with today. Let's take a look at the site, shall we? We recommend that you conduct the following land survey assessments. First, an archaeology and bat species inventory, then a wildlife habitat evaluation, an endangered species survey, including the historical site reportings, a soil survey and soil evaluations, and take a look at the demographics and the possible environmental justice communities in the area. From our research, we found that 96% of the population in this area are white, and that the average median household income is around that of the national median income. Therefore, we believe that environmental justice is not a major concern for this specific area. Next, Neri will introduce some key stakeholders and their concerns.
Thank you, Robin. Obviously, y'all at Rumpke are a crucial part of the planning and construction process, but we believe that public input can be incredibly valuable and powerful at times. Some of these concerns from residents in nearby towns can range from health and pollution-based to traffic and flood-based. For example, respiratory illnesses, cancer, and road salt contaminated water are all major public health concerns. In addition, traffic influx from garbage and construction vehicles will also come along with the expansion of this landfill. Some other important interest groups that are worth mentioning are hunters and trappers in the area, some environmental groups such as the Solid Waste Caucus and Ditch the Dump, and native populations whose land this landfill is located on. An archaeological survey conducted throughout Ohio found 3 indigenous mound structures in the Whitewater Township. These rich cultural and historical sites have incredible traditional significance, and that's why we think it's our priority to preserve and protect them. So we recommend preserving these areas as important historical sites if they're found at any point during construction on your site. They also have the added benefit of attracting more visitors to your landfill and generating more visibility.
There are various challenges that may become apparent during the construction and management of the new road. The soils in the area are clay-rich with high shrink swell potential and low permeability. This means that if the clays in the soil were saturated, they would expand and would have the potential to destroy the road or surrounding infrastructure. The clay soils also sit directly atop the bedrock, meaning that there's a high potential for slippage. If this were to happen, it would damage the road and cause high maintenance fees, as well as endangering the residents nearby. In addition, high acidity caused by road salt pollution would change clay structure, which should therefore change the way the particles were structured and decrease the permeability as well. These factors, along with compaction from construction, will lead to a higher runoff potential. In fact, this site is already rated as Class D by the Web Soil Survey for runoff potential. With these limitations in runoff potential also come limitations with erosion and sedimentation. Runoff carrying fertilizers, nutrients, salts, or sediments can enter a nearby stream and endanger the aquatic ecosystems living within. For example, sedimentation can cause increased turbidity, which will therefore increase heat absorption and clog gills of fish. There's also heat pollution from hot runoff from pavements, nutrient pollution from runoff of fertilizers or organic material, or salt pollution from the roads. Next, Caroline will elaborate on the effects of our road construction on forests and how to mitigate them.
Thanks, Eileen. Hamilton County is located in a small region of oak gum forest type, the only forest of this type in Ohio. This means that it provides a unique habitat and ecosystem for many plants and animals. This forest type is composed primarily of oaks, sweet gum, and black gum. Black gum in particular is incredibly valuable for wildlife because it produces soft mast, a trait uncommon among tree species. Its small purple berry is rich in carbs, sugars, and vitamins, and provides food for a diversity of wildlife. One problem we foresee is deforestation of land area in construction. It's inevitable that while we're constructing, we will have to cut down some trees. However, this is not our largest concern because the amount of land area to be cut is relatively small in comparison to the whole forest, and the vast majority of the forest will be preserved. The problem at the forefront of our mind is decreased permeability due to road salt, as Eileen explained before. This, along with increased osmosis due to salinity, makes it harder for trees to get water. This is especially hard for black gum because it prefers wet soils, so when it can't get the moisture it needs, it's harder for it to grow. It also makes way for invasive species that can tolerate these poor soil conditions where native plants cannot. Mary will go into more detail about invasive plants and their impact on our ecosystems.
The habitat disturbances created by the construction we're conducting gives excellent opportunities for invasive species to grow rapidly, and they will quickly take over open areas and forest edges if allowed. For this reason, we need to manage near parking lots and roads during our construction process. For example, bush honeysuckle proliferates rapidly and produces soft mast that, while it tastes great for wildlife, it's not very nutritionally. It has very little nutritional value. Another harmful impact is that some invasives can decrease vertical structure in forests, which can in turn negatively impact wildlife due to increased nest predation and brood parasitism. Next, Eileen will discuss some effects of aquatics on wildlife.
With road salt pollution also comes an influx of salty water into nearby streams. This can cause dehydration within the fish and hence fish kill and decrease biodiversity. This effect also extends to macroinvertebrates like the precious mayflies or freshwater mussels that we've talked about before. With these challenges in mind, we've developed an optimized route to minimize the environmental impacts of road construction and maintenance.
So here at Greenway Solutions, we had three main considerations in creating your road. The first of these considerations is to minimize the amount of disturbance. The second of these considerations was to minimize and control the amount of water runoff. The third of these considerations is to reduce sedimentation, erosion, and slippage. Here is our first section of road. In this first section, we wanted to distance ourselves away from sand run and allow for adequate setback. To do so, we have our road first run north before running to the northwest. This allows for some distance between our road and sand run and thus minimizes the disturbances. Our second section of road goes straight up a steep valley, allowing us to better channel and control our water runoff. This valley has a concave plan, which means that all of the water that runs into this valley gets channeled straight to the center. If instead we had chosen to use switchbacks or gone along a contour line, our water would have dispersed everywhere and our runoff and pollutants as well. Additionally, either of those two methods would have required a steeper and thus more erosive slope than the max of a 16.6% grade seen going up this slope. By using this natural valley, we help channel our runoff, and thus we can reduce the impacted area and better target our runoff to remove pollutants before it enters our surface waterways. Our third section of road takes us up onto the relatively flat and pre-developed ridgeline, thus reducing the amount of additional disturbance required, the erosion potential, and thereby sedimentation. Furthermore, on this tall ridgeline, this ridgeline is underlain by silty clay and silty clay loam, a relatively more permeable soil than that of the adjacent areas, allowing us to better minimize runoff. On this ridgeline, we try to follow the pre-existing contour lines as much as possible, to keep our road as flat as possible. We also chose to build our road on the northwest side of the central ridge rather than the southeast side. This allows our water to run off into Fox Run, the Fox Run watershed, which is better vegetated and thus allows for more natural filtration before our water enters the Whitewater River. This can help us preserve the pristine, exceptional warm water habitat that the Whitewater River currently presents. Our fourth and final section of road traverses the flattest and least vegetated land to get to the current landfill boundaries. Now, I acknowledge your concerns that this does run very close to your western property lines. However, we believe that with appropriately sized filter strips, we can still uphold your goal of being invisible at the property line. We also noticed that this does go a little bit more to the northwest than what is direct, and this is a skirt around the headwaters of Fox Run to reduce surface water pollution. Finally, we recommend that your parking lot be placed on the southwest side of the landfill. This area is the flattest and least vegetated, thus reducing disturbance and erosion. With this road plan in mind, Robin will tell you about the best management practices that we will use during the construction process to help our neighbors and protect the environment.
We've prepared a series of short-term best management practices in order to mitigate the immediate effects of construction. First, we'll construct from uphill to downhill, and this will help reduce sedimentation. This is because sedimentation that occurs from uphill construction will be filtered out by the pre-existing vegetation downhill. We'll apply the same practice to any demolition, and also move any demolition waste along pre-existing roads in order to reduce soil compaction and reduce the amount of unnecessary access routes. We'll also be working during working hours. That way we'll help mitigate any possible complaints about noise. Timing is key, and we plan on starting construction in early October. This helps reduce the risk of removing any important trees that serve as critical summer roosting habitat for bats. We'll also be planting sunflowers to help mitigate the effects of PAH, a toxic chemical produced by asphalt, and maintaining as much vegetation as possible to reduce soil erosion. Next, Neri will talk a little bit more about how we're mitigating invasive species.
To manage invasive species along the roadways constructed, we recommend mowing and applying an herbicide with a short half-life, such as tricloper, on these cleared areas in order to prevent any hidden or dormant invasives beneath the soil from taking over these roadways after a disturbance event. We recommend using an herbicide with a short half-life because that allows the herbicides to get decomposed and broken down in the soil much faster, so we can start planting native grasses again. You could also plant Indian grass or an endangered buffalo grass as phytoremediation techniques to remove trace herbicides and detoxify the soil.
So now moving on to some more long-term BMPs. How did we engineer our road to help you guys in the future? So we had 3 main goals going into this. First of all, we wanted to protect your road surface. Second of all, we wanted to minimize the amount of runoff. And third, we wanted to prevent any wildlife and vehicle collisions. To do so, we recommend that you establish a high crown yet impervious road surface. While we considered the implementation of permeable pavement, this is not the place to do it. The high shrink swell potential of the underlying clay soils would result in high stresses to your roadway every time it rained and dried, meaning that your roadway would have needed frequent repair. Instead, by implementing impervious yet a highly crowned surface, every time it rains, we can divert that water off the roadway into our lateral infiltration ditches. In these infiltration ditches, we will place perforated pipes to direct this runoff away from our roads and into the adjacent vegetation and soils to reduce runoff. To prevent wildlife collisions, we recommend that you keep this roadway at a max of 15 miles per hour and place wildlife crossing signs wherever appropriate. With this in mind, Caroline will tell you about salt application on your roadways.
One way to reduce the negative impacts of road salt on our soils, forests, and waterways is to mix the salt with beet juice. As crazy as this sounds, the beet juice gives the salt a distinct color, so when applying, it's very easy to tell where it's already been applied. So appliers can easily tell where it's been applied and avoid reapplying that same area, thus avoiding over-application. Another strategy we can use is to apply a thin layer of sand to the road. Sand increases friction, increasing traction, and reducing the need for road salt. These strategies have been applied in many areas across the US and has been extremely effective at drastically reducing the amount of road salt in our streams and waterways.
We'll also be implementing buffers throughout the site. These buffers have a variety of important impacts. For one, the vegetation helps hold the soil in, thereby reducing soil erosion and sedimentation. They also add organic matter to the soil, which has a lot of benefits. It improves soil structure, improves water retention, and improves filtration. These wooded buffers will also help as a barrier to noise, which will both address community concerns about noise and also help reduce disturbances to wildlife. They also act as important wildlife habitats and serve to add to the aesthetics of the site, because who doesn't love looking at trees? Next, we'll be going into all the different buffers and where they'll be located.
We recommend to establish pollinator habitat covering the entirety of the upper flat ridge lines. This provides many benefits, the first and foremost of which is that it reduces runoff and erosion by stabilizing topsoil with roots, slowing and taking up water, and filtering sediment and pollutants. It also provides habitat for pollinators. Pollinators pollinate 75% of native plants, which is incredibly valuable for creating a rich, diverse plant community. They also pollinate 1/3 of crops. This is incredibly helpful because it can provide community benefits for local residents by pollinating their gardens and farms. For maximum benefits, we recommend species such as butterfly weed, milkweed, wildflowers, legumes, and a mosaic of warm and cold season grasses. These flowers will be very aesthetic as well, especially in spring and summer when the flowers are in full bloom. Though these habitats are expensive and take much time and dedication to establish, once implemented, they are quite easy to maintain and are still incredibly effective at addressing our environmental concerns. Another way we can provide habitat is to erect nest boxes for birds and bat boxes for bats. Bats in particular have been heavily impacted by human activity, so any habitat we can provide is crucial.
We'll also be implementing wooded buffers throughout. For one, we'll put more woody buffers on steep backslope areas. The deep roots will help hold the soil to the bedrock and prevent clay slippage. On more low-lying toe slopes, we'll be putting more grassy herbaceous buffers, as these will help slow down water movement and increase infiltration. These buffers will also act as important habitats for wildlife such as gray squirrels, cedar waxwings, bobcats, wild turkeys, and more. They'll also, again, contribute to the aesthetics and reduce noise pollution.
Our final suggestion is to implement the use of artificial wetlands, which are becoming increasingly popular in waste management sites. We decided to place our wetland in between the bottom of the valley and where it intersects the stream. This way, it can act as a final check-in point before the water enters the stream. These wetlands are essential because they not only increase infiltration, reducing the risk of flooding, which was one of the main complaints of residents living nearby, but they also act as a habitat for a diverse number of plants and animals. Finally, it also acts as a filter, filtering landfill waste and other pollutants such as salt and nutrients. Now, Jamie will evaluate the costs and benefits of our best management practices.
Now, I acknowledge that you guys at Rumpke may be hesitant to implement these best management practices due to their high upfront cost. But I am here to tell you that multiple studies from the EPA actually show that they are economically beneficial in the long run. Now, why, right? So buffers and their associated structures are outstanding natural filters and act as outstanding natural flood control, saving you millions in flood damages and water filtration. Additionally, the improved aesthetics are simply invaluable. It improves your property values and generally bolsters the happiness of your community. Not only does it improve the view of Rumpke and the public view, but this will make it easier for you guys to garner the support of politicians and city commissioners to support your future projects and ventures, because they are more likely to support a project that is seen favorably in the public eye.
With all these practices in mind, we, Greenway Solutions, are proud to help you achieve waste to resources. Thank you.
Time was 1925. Okay. Question.
As you've mentioned, there's a number of stakeholders involved in this project, and I'm interested to hear kind of what your outreach and stakeholder participation will be in the development of these plans for this project.
I think in terms of public input, it would be great to have people from the community input their opinions and comments on anything new happening in the community. So, for example, this new road, they could help provide helpful information. Sorry.
I'm also thinking that earlier at the training sessions, they talked a lot about social media and the spread of disinformation. And we actually think it would be a great idea to kind of fight fire with fire and get Rumpke some social media. In particular, I'm thinking Twitter. That's like where most of the information happens. And especially for the young generation, which are a lot more increasingly active in political participation, I think it'd be a great way to reach out with them.
And in addition, during the trainings, we talked about how Rumpke had all these outreach programs, such as tours, meetings, videos, and etc. So we were thinking we could also implement that with the new road, with all the nature and the buffers we were adding to increase public support of the road and for Rumpke.
Sorry, I have one more thing. I forgot to talk about this, but the indigenous mounds I was talking about before, those historical sites would encourage community participation and more increased activity at the landfill, so people can get more involved.
Yeah, we do want to stress that we want to make sure that every involved party is involved. And this also means that if you notice in our road does cross state boundaries and it does go into Indiana. And we want to make sure that the Indiana residents around this region also get a say. So in our initial hearings and plannings, we want to make sure that they have a voice as well.
Especially since this is also some of their landfill. So in your specific route for this road, did it involve having to demolish the house and buildings?
No, in our specific plan, we specifically skirted in a path that avoided the houses. So they would not need to be demolished in this path. However, we do acknowledge that if there comes a time when the demolition of houses is important, we also have to time it correctly, which Robin can talk about.
Yeah, so mostly we're thinking about how these abandoned barns and houses could serve as roosting habitats for bats, which is why we plan on starting construction in October when most of the bats are moving from their summer roosting habitat to their winter roosting habitat, which is mostly like mines and caves. So in that case, if we did need to demolish any buildings or trees, there wouldn't be any bats left in them.
Also, going on that, bat houses on the sides of buildings can be extremely effective at providing bat habitat. So, especially when they're on the south side of the house in an area with a lot of sun, so it's nice and warm for them. They have been very effective in many locations, so we can use these buildings and repurpose them as bat habitat, which is a great way to help endangered species and preserve these houses.
Team, thank you for the presentation. You talked in the presentation some about the long-term BMPs and the benefits with infrastructure. Can you talk about the longer-term sustainability of the project?
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing that we can look at this is at the economics. And I do acknowledge that building these buffer strips has a very high initial cost. Usually it's about $4,000 to $40,000 per acre to establish. And we have a goal acreage of about 36 acres, just looking at the scales on these maps. And that would cost us anywhere between $12,000 and $120,000 to establish. However, on average, it takes about $233 a year to manage just 1 acre of these buffer lands, which means that each year we expect like an annual upkeep cost of around $8,400, which in the grand scheme of things really isn't a lot. And in particular, we chose pollinator habitat because after you establish a pollinator habitat, they're very low maintenance. So we think that this cycle is actually extremely sustainable for the future.
And again, we hope that with the buffers and nature we establish and the indigenous mounds, we hope that we can increase tourism or support for Rumpke, which would outweigh the upfront costs.
Also, adding to what Jamie said before, we're expecting an artificial wetland at the bottom as part of our recommendations, and 90% of wetlands in Ohio have been basically demolished, and so this would provide a unique and very diverse habitat for many wildlife species, adding to the sustainability of this project.
So I know that you addressed and thought very thoroughly about the road, and particularly you were talking about the salt issue and all the different negative effects from that. As I look at the topography of your road, you're able to stay pretty flat until that last big hill, or the first big hill if you're coming in. And I'm sure you've considered options, because obviously the best way to mitigate salt is to have less salt, and less hills means less salt. So could you just speak a little bit about like kind of what the options were and why you decided this one was the best option?
Yeah, so if I go back to that slide, do you want to go back to it? So as I was saying, our options other than going up this valley were that we could create switchbacks. So basically, so if you notice that we have to get from here, this is our start point, and we can't change our proposed road entrance to up there. And instead of going up this valley, we could have instead chosen to try to go across the contour lines as much as possible, right? To keep as flat of a surface as possible. But what happens is that if you notice here, this is what we call a convex face. And water ends up dispersing out of this face. It kind of spreads everywhere. And this would mean that any salt that we apply there would kind of end up going everywhere, and it would require a much larger buffer area to make sure that we effectively catch all of the salt. So instead, by choosing an area that is that is concave and all the water channels in, we can mitigate that salt. Our other options were kind of just like follow a contour line up. And yes, while like the flatter road would mean less salt, once again, that's more runoff and more area that we would need to catch. And the parts of switchbacks where you go up the road, those still really need to be salted. I've driven a lot in Utah, and it's most certainly not fun, and you need a lot of salt in those.
And also, besides salt, I think we decided against going along the switchbacks because there would be a high risk of landslides due to the high precipitation in Ohio.
We are also planning on an artificial wetland just around this area, right below, right below where that valley meets the river, which will help mitigate any potential runoff and toxins that could be in the runoff.
I just have one question, not necessarily environmental, but I see that the parking lot, is that on the current property, or is that something you're recommending we add to that?
The parking lot is on the property that they currently own. And actually, if you notice, the parking lot's on an area that they have already developed and cleared. So it required basically minimal clearance of any additional trees. And it's well within their property boundaries, which are shown by that blue line. This picture that we had did not show the continuation of that blue line and the end boundary on the western side, but it does show that it is well within property boundaries.
And is the parking lot where the scale house and wheel wash will be as well?
We were actually, we were thinking that the wheel wash could be at the base of the site near the entrance, because that way any trucks, their wheels have been everywhere pretty much, it would wash off any invasive species, any seeds, or anything that could bring them in. It would wash them all off and make sure they didn't get into our property.
Yeah, basically the closer to the end we get, the less probability that it goes somewhere we don't want it to go, right? So that's why we want it at the end. And also the less time it has to gain some velocity and cause erosion. So the closer to the bottom, the better.
I got another question, maybe. Just downstream from Fox Run, I remember seeing on the map, there's a kind of a development, and then in Indiana, not too far away, there's a school. To what degree did you think about your messaging special to those communities where they're, are just downstream or more sensitive, like schools, tend to be more sensitive when you're doing things like landfills? Had you given that some special outreach thought, and like what your outreach plan would be?
Yeah, definitely. We would have some outreach programs, and we want to educate the schools and the people nearby about the risks of living near a landfill, but also we can reassure them about how conservation buffers and our best management practices will help protect them from potential contaminants in landfills running into their residents.
It's also a great opportunity to teach about pollinators and wetlands and all the wildlife and plants that live here, because of all of the natural habitats we have implemented.
One consideration that we had was to establish a walking trail up along the side of our road, because we already managed for the infiltration.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you for the questions.
Oh, thank you guys.
Whoa. All right, everybody keep your seats because I think our next team is ready here. So just give me a minute. All right, everybody put your hands together for team 2222.
Okay. We are Team 2222. I am Sienna. Can we start? All right. Good afternoon, Rumpke Associates. I would like to introduce you to evaluations and recommendations for the Bond Road landfill access. We were hired to develop a proposal for your new road from San Run Road after the acquisition of Bond Road's landfill. Previously, a sharp left turn was required to access the landfill, and this made it difficult for transport and navigation of the road from the pre-existing road to the Bond Road landfill. So in response, we have developed a new road that will be located with an easier access point and takes into consideration the community concerns along with the environmental impact of building a road in this forested area that is close to the Sand Run tributary. I will now pass it over to Katie.
So Rumpke and their employees are a priority, but we must also consider the interests of regulatory government agencies by following their regulations, as well as the interest of local residents in both Ohio and Indiana. We understand that Rumpke initially had a projected cost of $3 million that is now possibly going to double to $6 million. And we want to maximize the value of the BMPs that we recommend by choosing practices that are both cost-effective and efficient. And in these considerations, we will also be thinking of the safety of both Rumpke employees and other road users. Josh?
We have completed a comprehensive environmental impact assessment for the area in which we are going to be constructing the roadway, the parking lot, and the entrance. Due to the potential for soil compaction, soil disturbance, impermeability, and deforestation, these are a few of the concerns we have identified. Throughout our presentation, we aim to provide viable options to mitigate the ecological impacts of these concerns and to ensure the presence of a sustainable natural community in the area for the years to come. Lena?
Behind me now, you see our suggested path route from the Sand Run Road up to the current Bond Road landfill. Now, this entire site is unfortunately highly limited for local roads and streets, but we have chosen the currently deforested area that was once a residential area because this is the only region that has only 3 limiting factors limiting its construction. So we will have to contend with shrink swell capacity, which is where the soil will shrink and expand, frost action, which is where the soil underground can actually freeze, and the low strength, which of course presents a problem for our trucks, which will be driving atop it. However, these 3 problems can all be remediated by adding components to the soil. We suggest specifically adding calcium carbonate or lime, as well as sand to remediate the low strength of the soil. Unlike the other sites on this region, we do not have to contend with slope. As you can see, it's at the top of the ridge. We do not have to contend with slippage, and we do not have to contend with flooding by using this location. Moreover, since this region has already been deforested, we will have limited soil disturbance and deforestation necessary at this site. And finally, you can see that the region marked in yellow is the projected expansion for the Bond Hill landfill, and this will allow us to access that expansion once it is constructed. Now I will pass it off to Josh to talk about our best management practices.
Before we begin construction, there are a few surveys that we need to complete in order to ensure that this is a viable place for the road, parking lot, and entrance. First, we have used soil data from the National Cooperative Soil Survey to craft this management plan. However, we have not gone and sampled the soil in person, so we would definitely recommend going on site to the location to sample the soil to determine its composition and suitability for these management practices that we recommended. For example, Lena mentioned some issues like low strength, and some of these can be remedied by adding chemicals to the soil. However, we don't want to add these unless it is absolutely necessary. Second, we need to conduct a rare plant survey to determine if there are any threatened or endangered species in the area. And if there are, we may need to modify or alter our plans because we want to leave these species in their habitat to ensure their longevity. Third, we have been informed by Rumpke that they have already completed the endangered species survey and the bat survey and found that there were no endangered species nor bats in the area, so we do not need to reperform those. And as of now, the site is viable for building our road, parking lot, and entrance pending the results of these other surveys. Connor?
In addition to the ecological surveying that Josh has mentioned, we also need to maintain compliance in terms of the preservation of our cultural resources. In this case, pertinent legislation at both the state and federal level includes the National Historic Preservation Act, which necessitates that all federal agencies prioritize the conservation of our archaeological sites during projects that require the excavation of soil, which in this case is necessitated by the fact that we are building a road. Due to the procedure being started by the excavation, the Ohio State Historic Preservation Office is also concerned, and they necessitate that a comprehensive cultural resource survey must begin before any actual construction or excavation on site begins. As there is not strong historic precedent for the finding of archaeological sites in Southwest Ohio, specifically Hamilton County, we did not find any archaeological sites in the preliminary surveying, but in the event that further archaeological sites are discovered as we begin to excavate, workers and the excavation would immediately stop, and then the Ohio State Historic Preservation Office would be consulted before any further actions are taken. A process called mitigation would begin, where those artifacts are taken off of site and preserved so that we may account for the indigenous cultures that occupied this land before we are using it now. On to Sienna.
So leading into the actual construction stage, we want to consider the impact that the building process will have on the surrounding environment and habitats. Prior to laying the road, we would like to construct a wooden pathway adjacent to the proposed the proposed road area. This will allow for construction machinery and equipment to travel up and down the proposed road area, which will then not track sediment back onto the already built road that can then wash off and lead to sedimentation in the nearby Sand Run tributary. Additionally, we would like to add silt fencing to either side of the construction zone. This will prevent sedimentation from being washed down, and again, contributing to sedimentation in the nearby Sand Run tributary. And lastly, we want to implement a 24-hour waiting period after heavy precipitation events. This way that machinery is not going over wetted or dampened soil after it has rained, and then the soil will not compact, which would then degrade the soil's draining qualities. And lastly, the soil that we excavate from the construction site, we would like to stockpile that for future Rumpke operations. So this can include building additional landfills, lining them, or the top layer of soil that is required when a landfill is inactive. And I will pass it to Connor. Oh, sorry. Education and outreach. So we know that there have been many community concerns about Rumpke operations in the past, and we would like to take into account the local demographics and include the community in this process. So town hall meetings and local paper publications will be used to publicly state the results and updates of monitoring and testing that is done by Rumpke, done by the company Rumpke. And we would also like to try to battle the misinformation campaign that is currently online by establishing Rumpke's own personal online social media platform. This way it can give information directly to constituents and therefore try to dispel any untrue claims that is ruining Rumpke's reputation. With this, we can help build a sense of transparency and a trusting relationship with the community, and by them knowing that we are also taking their interest into consideration along with the environmental impacts that the company may have. Connor?
One of the main concerns that was voiced by nearby residents through the voice of the Cincinnati Post was the issue of flooding near the Sand Run entrance to the proposed road, and the fact that that flooding may be contaminated with runoff leachate from the landfill. So first we must understand what leachate is. Leachate is the byproduct of when rain falls on top of a landfill and then percolates through the profile of the landfill as it goes, picking up hazardous organic materials and heavy metals, which by the time the leachate is fully formed at the bottom of the landfill, would then be too hazardous to emit back into the environment for fear of damaging natural soil and water resources. So to understand how the Bond Road landfill would be able to deal with leachate, we need to look towards the federal piece of legislation, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, which mandates that all modern landfills must run with 2 different independent systems that both monitor any leachate contamination in the surrounding area and prevent that contamination from happening. So the first one is the complex liner system, the several feet of liners that are installed at the bottom of every landfill. These consist of impermeable clay, geotextile membranes, plastic geomembranes, gravel, and fluff trash, which both inhibit the ability of any water to escape from the landfill and also protect the liner so that perforations do not occur when trash is placed into the landfill. For these reasons, we're confident that the ponding that is occurring outside of Sand Run Road is not contaminated with leachates from the landfill because there simply is not a mechanism for those leachates to escalate through the levels of the landfill after it is formed at the bottom. Pumps will remove excess leachate so that it does not overflow, and the excess leachate will be stored in lagoons on the surface, but there's no capillary action or other natural forces that would take those leachates back to the surface, have them recharge through the soil surface, and then run downhill. In the event that contamination does occur, Rumpke will quickly be notified and be able to pass that along to residents, and that comes through the required groundwater monitoring wells under RCRA. So these wells are placed at strategic locations around the landfill, close to surface water sources, close to groundwater sources, and any residential drinking wells, and they periodically take small amounts of water from the underground aquifer system and test it for any chemicals that would be indicative of a perforation in the liner of the landfill, which is then causing leachates to escape. In the event of this kind of breach happening to the landfill, Rumpke would then quickly receive this information and be able to pass it along to residents, telling them to avoid their drinking water, and then quickly send a team to try to repair this leak so that it may once again be a safe landfill. On to Katie.
So as Connor mentioned, community and groups like Ditch the Dump believe that our newly constructed entrance is responsible for the increased flooding in the area. However, engineers have confirmed that this increased flooding has nothing to do with the entrance. So it seems that the public and professionals are on different pages. We recommend planting poplar trees around the new road entrance and in the surrounding area, as poplar trees have extensive root systems that can absorb excess water to reduce flood volumes and can also absorb petroleum hydrocarbons coming from the trucks that are going up and down the roads to decrease the pollution. And this also solves the issue of frozen roads during the winter time from the increased flood volume. So we will be able to improve safety for road users and Rumpke employees. And by addressing the frozen roads during the winter, we can also reduce the amount of road salt used, so we can prevent pollution from sodium and chloride contamination. And of course, we hope that by addressing the flooding issue, we can build a more trusting relationship between Rumpke and the community. Mina?
Just beyond the entrance of our projected road is the Sand Run tributary, which is home to many wildlife. And so that road will actually cut through the wildlife habitat, and we fear that this may cause wildlife habitat fragmentation, where the populations on either side of the road are separated and unable to interbreed, limiting the genetic diversity of the populations and thereby making them more vulnerable to becoming either threatened or endangered. So in order to prevent or minimize the amount of fragmentation that does occur, we suggest that the bridge that traverses the Sand Run tributary be as long as possible. This will not only ensure that there is space beneath the bridge for a wildlife corridor where wildlife can travel freely across the two sides of the property, but also it avoids us having to build through the loamy sand that is on either side of the river. So loamy sand is a very unwelcoming substance for construction, and this allows us to avoid having to construct atop that. Josh?
During the construction process, a certain amount of deforestation is inevitable. Obviously, this will try to be minimized. However, there are still two important ecological concerns that we identified. The first being a decreased wildlife habitat, and the second being the potential for invasive species to colonize the open areas, where they can quickly become a problem. The first recommendation we have is replanting the native oak gum tree species, to restore the natural stand, and this will both provide mast for wildlife food and stabilize the soil in the nearby area that was disturbed during the road construction. For invasives, we recommend clearing any invasives by spot spraying broad spectrum herbicides to remove them, and then allowing the natural seed bank in the soil of native grasses and wildflowers to regenerate, therefore creating a healthy layer of vegetative cover for both wildlife and the environment as a whole. Katie?
So our road and the nearby sand run are parts of the Whitewater watershed, meaning that any sediments and pollution from the construction of the road could potentially end up in the Whitewater River. And according to the Ohio EPA 2017 Whitewater Report, sensitive species make up 40 to 60% of the fish community in the Whitewater River at tested sites. And this includes sport fish like the striped bass and rockfish, which are important not only for recreational fishing activities, but also for the fishing industry. So we hope to limit sediments and pollutants getting into our waterways so that we can make sure our important aquatic species are safe. And we can do this by constructing riparian buffers along the sides of the road, especially in the areas where vegetation is more limited. And this will filter sediments, stabilize the stream bank to reduce erosion, and provide habitat and detritus for organisms in nearby creeks and streams. Lena?
We've been presenting multiple best management practices, and of course, these are in line with our environmental impact assessment, which will help environmental health. But ultimately, our number one priority is Rumpke the company. So we want to reiterate that these actions, while they may be short-term investments for Rumpke, they are in Rumpke's long-term benefit, or long-term, benefit. Under the federal legislation, the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, Rumpke will be held financially responsible for any contamination events that should occur. These best management practices that we've been presenting will mitigate the effects of these potential contaminations and prevent them, thereby making this current investment a future investment into Rumpke's budget. Second, we understand that Rumpke has a rocky relationship with the community right now, and it is currently referred to as a locally undesired land use. And so we hope that by investing in best management practices, Rumpke establishes itself as concerned with both community and environmental health, thereby remediating some of that community trust that it might have lost.
We are here today because the existing design of the Bond Hill Road landfill is inadequate for both the economic viability of the landfill, as well as it compromises the safety and the efficiency of trucks coming into and out of the landfill. So it's clear that a new road needs to be constructed, and the only available option is an access road off of Sand Run. We need to take into account the numerous concerns that are expressed by the nearby community for an extensive road construction project in this area. So we've recommended a series of best management practices that will not only increase the efficacy of the road building project and address the community concerns, while also balancing ecological needs and preserving the natural habitat. We've recommended planting of trees to siphon off excess floodwater. We also want to remediate any hydrocarbons that may run off from petrochemicals that are being left on the road by the trucks. We want to involve the community in tree planting efforts to restore any oak or gum trees that are being removed to bolster the strength of the stand in the area. And we've recommended a longer road being constructed to allow for wildlife to travel beneath of it as a wildlife corridor, while also making it more efficient for Rumpke because they don't need to spend money on extensive remediation for the loamy sand textures of the soil on the stream bank. We hope that Rumpke takes these recommendations into account, not only for the environmental benefits that they may bring, but also to ensure that the nearby community is satisfied with the actions of the company. For we fear that the community may eventually reach a breaking point should they not see Rumpke taking actions to remediate the effects of their actions on the ecological area surrounding it. This could result in a class action lawsuit, or should a catastrophic contamination event occur that is unmitigated by best management practice, Superfund litigation might even be initiated, and both of these events would result in a large economic blow to the company, as well as a reputational decline as well. We see landfills as providing a service to their surrounding communities to dispose of their trash, but part of that also comes with assuaging the concerns that community members may face. So we hope that Rumpke will take these recommendations into account. Thank you for your consideration, and we now open it up to questions.
Thank you for your presentation. You had mentioned planting poplars as a way to provide some water absorption. Are there any other tree species that you're considering, just in case something may affect the poplars, and then you might end up with a situation where you do not have that?
So we chose poplars because they are known as a very strong phytoremediation technique, as well as very good at absorbing water. And we did see that another viable option is willow trees, should the poplars not work out. But we did recommend poplars because they are very good at absorbing those petroleum hydrocarbons, should the trucks happen to cause any contamination by the oil that they do produce.
So I was interested in the idea of the expanding the bridge to create a wildlife corridor there. And of course, it occurs to me that wildlife in the riparian zone down at the creek, might be different than on the upslopes and the hilltops and things. Have you given any thought to that same issue of trapping wildlife on one side of a busy road on the, ridge areas?
We have given some thought to that, and in the end, we didn't want to interrupt the road too much with too many extensive bridges or any unnecessary twists or turns. So we sort of determined that since a bridge was already necessary, it would be good to use that as an opportunity for a wildlife corridor, and the opportunity presented itself there. And we are hopeful that wildlife will be able to find that corridor and be able to move about as they like.
And adding on to Josh's point, we mentioned how we wanted to reinitiate the previous oak gum stands in the area, and this would include being closer to the road and most likely feathering that area that is currently deforested. So hopefully this will in turn encourage wildlife to be able to cross the road in a safe measure, as long as we are also considering employees and Rumpke Associates.
Thank you, team, for the presentation. You talked a little bit about some of the long-term savings from the ecological practices that you would recommend. Can you talk about the overall long-term sustainability of the project and your vision there?
So a lot of the practices that we elected to recommend for implementation by Rumpke, we saw as serving both short-term goals while also working towards long-term objectives as well. So that's why we recommended investing in this infrastructure early for a bridge long enough for wildlife corridors underneath, and also for the planting of these many trees, which are actually more long-term oriented in our opinion, because as the trees develop and mature, they will develop those more extensive root systems, and it will increase their capacity for both phytoremediation, for providing food and habitat for wildlife, and also for absorbing water.
You guys mentioned about adding soil amendments to address the shrinking swale issues. Did you consider any type of engineering type best management practices for that?
So fortunately, the two substances that we were considering in adding to the soil are two substances that don't damage the soil's health or the health for the wildlife and plants that may be living there. So we did recommend limestone, or ground up lime, and sand. So the sand just adds to the soil. It's one of the inorganic compounds of soil. And the lime is actually beneficial to plants as well, because we understand that Ohio's soils are growing increasingly acidic. Lime is a basic substance, so adding it to the soil actually helps balance out that soil chemistry and actually makes nutrients more available to plants. So we actually see the addition of the lime as kind of like a dual best management practice, if you will.
So you mentioned that there's a perception of the public that there's already a flooding issue that they're attributing to the landfill, and your engineers have concluded that it's really not the fault of the landfill. But knowing that it's hard to overcome public perception, how have you thought about how you might be able to, using science or engineering, kind of show the residents that the flooding is not really a result of, the landfill, the current landfill?
So we did mention that we wanted to create like a social media platform for Rumpke to be able to post any like studies or things like that online for easier access to the public, so we can give them direct information.
And in addition, I think they were particularly concerned that this flooding contained leachate from the landfill. And as Connor mentioned, this just doesn't add up that there would be leachate in this flooding. So one thing we thought about was potentially doing tests on it and publishing the results, or even having the citizens come and observe some sort of testing to show them that this is not toxic flooding.
As a follow-up to that question, not only is it the quality of the water, but it's also the quantity of the water that's going downstream. Are you going to be implementing any BMPs to restrict or control the amount, the quantity of water going off the property with the increase in impervious surface?
Yeah, we mentioned that we will be adding riparian buffers, which will kind of like slow the velocity of any runoff and also be able to absorb any like sediments in the runoff.
In particular, we did mention the poplar trees, which are fortunately trees with a very extensive root system and that are very good at doing what we call hydraulic flow, or limiting the flow of water, period. So hopefully that will limit the water volume that does end up on our roads, despite the addition of an impervious surface.
All right, let's give all three teams a final round of applause. Reminders, we are back here at 7 o'clock tonight for the awards presentation, and then get your party shoes on because there's a big dance in the house. All right, everybody, we'll see you later.